Hello, everyone. This is another episode of Fire Breathing Rob. If you look for us on YouTube, it's FIREBREATHIN. Then there's a space, and then ROB on YouTube. All right. And hopefully you guys please subscribe, also share, and pass these videos around, comment, and like the videos, and doing those things, make sure this video gets out to the most people possible. So we appreciate anything about that. I have somebody that's been on the program before, Stephen Zunes, and he is a professor of politics and also international studies at the University of San Francisco. Stephen, thanks so much for coming back on the program. Greatly appreciate it.
Great to be with you.
All right, Stephen. So firstly, I just want to get a quick question on this before we dabble into everything that's all the craziness of what's going on right now. We talked lastly when you were on the program last about the California primary, Senator Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, and all that jazz. Mm-hmm. With the race completely changed since the last time we talked, Sanders was the front runner. Now it's, the race is up in the air with Biden has a pretty decent sized lead. Mm-hmm. What is your take on, first of all, what happened in California? They're still apparently counting votes over there. It's not.
Well, they finally finished counting, and Sanders was a solid winner. But of course, overall, Biden has what very well may be an insurmountable lead, and it's. I mean, on the one, there are two parts of my reaction. One is, are you effing kidding me, Biden? I mean, really, that we had so many options, and two I particularly like, Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders, but I mean, the others, not great but decent. But Biden, not only do I have serious issues about his particular positions on things, which we can talk about more if you'd like, but in many ways he seems to be just about the weakest candidate, especially against somebody like Trump, and that's what's really disturbing to me. That in many ways he's very similar to Hillary Clinton in that he has issues that will both alienate the left, that is lower turnout, increased voting for third parties, making it so that even if people do vote for him, they're not going to give money, they're not going to go door to door, they're not going to have the enthusiasm that some of the other candidates would have generated. But more importantly, that he's going to be very vulnerable to certain key swing constituents, and especially his hawkish foreign policy and his neoliberal trade policies that would end up alienating a lot of working class voters that went for Obama in 2008 and 2012 and then shifted to Hillary Clinton in 2016. Indeed, if you look at the areas that shifted most dramatically from Obama in his two elections to Trump in 2016, they were areas that parallel almost exactly the highest casualty rates from the Iraq and Afghanistan wars. And what Trump did during the 2016 campaign, he's going to do it again, is to claim that, I oppose the Iraq war, which he didn't, but it's clearly Biden played a very, very important role in making it possible in his position as head of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee and getting the war authorization through the democratically controlled Congress. But not only he pressed on that, but he's going to just go about, I'm bringing the troops home again, which he's not, but he's been getting away with claiming he has. That I'm going to put America first and not spend trillions of dollars in these overseas wars, and he's going to win a lot of folks for whom that's important. And of course, Sanders, Warren, the anti-war candidates who have never had that problem.
I want to ask you this as a person that's also in the progressive movement, such as yourself. Why don't you feel like Warren and Sanders never came together? They talk so much about how they're such great friends. They've worked together multiple times. They're very cordial with each other. We know the issues that happened in the campaign. But in the end, Bernie, it seems like, or maybe Warren for that case, I shouldn't, say that about Bernie, but it seems like Bernie didn't go after Warren hard for her endorsement and kind of kiss her ring and say, hey, if I win, I'll put you as vice president, or say, come on my ticket right now and I'll put you as my vice president. Even if he didn't like her enough, he still, I feel like, should have did that because he gets with Warren still that liberal left votes, but also some establishment votes.
Exactly. I mean, there are indications that Warren did reach out actually fairly early in the process for some kind of unity effort, and then was rebuffed. But of course, you also hear versions from the other directions. I think what was up was that both of them sincerely thought that they would be a better president, and I don't mean that out of ego. I think just in terms of what they would be able to do, what they would be able to accomplish. I think also that they both thought that they were more likely to win against Trump, and so I don't fault either of them for being selfish or egotistical or whatever. But I think they unfortunately, in hindsight, of course, it would have been very good if they had united, because I think it would have been enough to to win. And ironically, I think even though Biden, or even though Bernie ended up getting more support than Warren, I think in certain ways Warren would have been more likely to win, simply because I don't think the Democratic establishment would have allowed Bernie to win one way or the other. and, and Warren, she's almost as left as Bernie, but I think she was somehow less scary to the establishment, and they would have certainly fought her. I think when push come to shove, she might have actually been able to win. But it's all 2020 hindsight at this point, and it's very, very disappointing that we're likely stuck with Biden. Not the least of which is that I think, and I was quite confident Warren or Sanders, in fact most of the Democrats, would be able to defeat Trump. But I'm really super nervous about Biden.
Agreed. To go into more about Biden. All right, this is the thing that gets me. Watching this past week on The View and also on MSNBC with Nicole Wallace, a Bush stooge that works on NBC. Seems like MSNBC is hiring a lot of Bush people to work on their own network, which is a little strange for a liberal network. But regardless of that, Biden seems to have some serious cognitive issues. We've seen issues with this on those interviews that I just explained, where he's forgetting and he just says, my time is up, in the debate also. So what is your take on that? It seems like the mainstream media is not saying that. When people on the left call that out, they say it's made up, it's just a gaffe. I think this is a serious problem for Joe Biden, because in the debates, if he says my time is up against Trump, Trump will capitalize on that like anything. And also, if he forgets what he's saying or babbles on, Trump will hit him real hard. And that's what, as you said, being worried about Biden losing, that's some of the things that I'm seeing Biden could really get hurt in a debate against Trump.
I'm afraid you're right. I mean, I don't want to speculate in terms of whether he's actually in decline in terms of his mental capabilities. I mean, I think we got to be careful about ageism and about things like that. But at the same time,
Stephen, he is definitely. Just a second though, because guys like us, we can't say that. But what they were doing to Bernie Sanders, saying he's 78 years old when he had that the stint put in, he needs to drop out, he should quit, he's too old. But then we say these things about Biden, which is clear. Bernie looks like he's 34 years old.
Bernie's great. Bernie's doing very, very well. Thank you very much. But again, Biden was known for his gaffes and things, for many, many years. But he's definitely not nearly as articulate, nearly as lucid as he was before. And you're right. I think Trump could very well take advantage of it, and whether or not it is emblematic of cognitive decline, I think Trump and a lot of people are going to interpret it that way, and it's going to be very hard. A bigger question of where does the left go now? I mean, let's say that Biden is the nominee, and let's say that he wins, and I think there's still at least a 50% chance that that's going to happen. But the interesting thing about Biden, I mean, people like me and you and others go on and on about all the terrible votes he's had and a lot of things, and they're all true. But he's if you look at his career, he's been something chameleon. When he first ran for Senate way the hell back in 1972, this gives you an idea how old he is. The minimum age for a senator is 30, and he was elected in 1972. and he was running as a McGovern anti-war Democrat. And he took some pretty liberal positions on some things. He actually, interesting, he voted for the Gulf War. I mean, he voted against the Gulf War in 1991, even as he voted for the invasion, which doesn't really make sense, because I mean, I oppose both wars personally, but the Gulf War, on several levels, a lot more justifiable than the invasion. But he voted no on that one, but then voted yes for the invasion, which doesn't make any sense. I mean, I can see you supporting both. I can see, or I can see you supporting neither, as I did, and one can make a case why supporting the Gulf War, which was trying to reverse Iraqi aggression, and doing it was legal because the UN Security Council said they could, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. How you could support that, but then oppose the invasion, which I know a lot of people took that position. But the other way around, that doesn't make any sense logically. I mean, and I think it just shows that he is kind of chameleon, because post 9/11, maybe he wanted to be tough back then he was a little more liberal. And here's the really crazy thing, that within the I've gone on and on and on about what a hawk he is, not just on Iraq, but on Israel, Palestine, some other things. But within the Obama administration, he was actually more the moderate. He was actually fighting against Secretary of Defense Gates and Secretary of State Clinton, who were the more hawkish people in the administration. So what I'm saying is that he's kind of malleable, and the way he talks about two sides out of his mouth, that he can be buddy with these segregationists, and he could be buddy with the labor and the liberal wing of the party. The fact is that I think that given how the Democratic Party has moved to the left, given this new infusion that's come in with the Sanders and Warren campaign, that I think we could actually make him a relatively progressive president. Already, the platform he has stated is actually the most liberal since George McGovern in '72. And I would say he's not sincere, he's just doing that to get elected. But despite the fact that politicians do break their promises a lot, when you really stick your neck out on certain positions, running for president, you pretty much have to keep 80% of them. And so I would and some of your listeners, especially people who've read my writings, know how damn cynical I am about Biden. I've written a half dozen articles just trashing the guy, but I don't want to make people so cynical to think, oh, he's just like Bush or just like Trump, or don't bother voting for him, because I really think in certain ways it's less important who we elect as the choices we give them. And Democrats we can push to move a little bit in that direction. Republicans, by contrast, are hopeless.
This is Stephen Zunes, professor of politics and international studies at University of San Francisco. You are in San Francisco right now. We know the coronavirus has been going on for quite a long time. Gavin Newsom is the governor. A lot of people have praised him and Eric Garcetti in Los Angeles for the homeless issue. We know there's a lot of homeless in Los Angeles, but there's a lot of homeless in San Francisco where you are. I was told, and I just want you to correct the record here, that in Los Angeles, they're putting all the homeless people that they can find in hotels to try to not contaminate, keep people from getting contaminated. Are they doing that in San Francisco? And if so, do you believe that that's a great idea?
Well, actually, I work in San Francisco, or I did work in San Francisco. I'm teaching via Zoom now. I actually live in Santa Cruz, which is down the coast, but also, proportionally, we have an even worse homeless problem here. There has been an effort to move people into hotels. I mean, Santa Cruz, like San Francisco, is a tourist town, so a lot of the hotels that would normally be full are empty, and that is one thing that people are doing, and finding other alternatives. I think that I've been impressed actually at that the communities are taking this seriously. I mean, frankly, it's less out of a kindness of heart, but also the realization that if homeless people get the virus, they can spread it to non-homeless people, and so just for public health reasons, they are willing to go the extra mile that they were not willing to do prior to this. Yeah, I feel quite positive that the Bay Area has been somewhat ahead of the curve in relative to a lot of places, and that we were the first place in the country to get shelter in place, even though at that point we had less infections than say the Seattle area or the New York area or other areas that
Mhm.
are or have since become hot spots. And as a result, there has been there's been an increase. There's definitely been an increase in cases. I mean, here in Santa Cruz County, there's been a growth in cases, but it's been a linear growth as opposed to an exponential growth, and that's huge. And There have been no deaths so far, which is quite remarkable. And I'm feeling very. I mean, personally, I mean, I'm feeling pretty safe as someone who's over 60. I am in the vulnerable segment of the population, and and um, and obviously I have our concern. My son is an EMT and ambulance driver, so he's in a relatively high risk group. And so there, but relative to many other parts of the country, especially New York, I feel quite fortunate that here in the Greater Bay Area that we took action as early as we did, even though at the moment people were thinking it was excessive. As we know now, it was not, not in the least.
So Stephen, you just spoke about your son being an EMT. What is he saying right now? With I mean, maybe it's under control, and that's great where you are. But there's still people getting sick, and we, hear all the time on the TV, the radio, social media about masks, protective gear,
Hmm.
and people that are first responders, whether doctors, nurses, EMT, they're not getting that gear. And you even talk about people that are working. They don't have that kind of gear, and somebody comes in and can affect somebody that's working in a supermarket.
Hmm.
So how is your son dealing with that every day, day to day? And what has he told you about what's going on, in the rescue squads, in the hospitals where he's working?
Well, so far we do have, there are enough gloves and masks to cover people, but we know that's not always going to be the case. I actually live in a co-housing community, and what's been really nice with our neighbors here is that a combination of we have a couple of doctors, a leading epidemiologist in our community, and along with another member of a community who's a big computer guy who has a 3D printer, and a Danish woman who lives here who's an amazing seamstress. Collectively, we've been getting together, and we have been, as a community, been manufacturing masks, and
Wow.
and it is, and really high quality ones that meet all the medical specifications, and this is and I think really this is what's going to take. It's going to take community efforts like this, because we're sure as hell not getting the leadership that we need from Washington, um, and Trump's failure to use his executive power to use
Mhm.
essentially wartime powers to force manufacturers to stop building whatever they normally build and start building ventilators and masks
Yeah.
and things like that. I mean, that is criminally irresponsible.
Who dropped the ball, Stephen? We just saw on CNN there was a report that came out rather in 2003, said that they've been telling the U.S. government since 2003 that this pandemic could happen. Not so much with this disease, but a disease in general that
Yeah,
could get a
something
lot
like
of people.
this. Yeah.
Yeah, something
Yeah.
that could happen.
Obama, when the Ebola epidemic broke out, uh,
Mm,
even though it didn't really come to the United States, he put a specialist in charge as their czar. He didn't put in his vice president or any political figure. He put medical people
mhm,
in charge, and they rolled out a detailed plan, so we were ready in case it really did hit our shores and start to spread. In addition, he put a full-time position into the National Security Council, whose main job it
right.
was to mobilize in the case of an epidemic. Unfortunately, Trump ended up eliminating that position about a year ago. Similarly, he made sure that the Center for Disease Control had a number of specialists that were, again, focused on the possibility of pandemic. Trump eliminated these positions, and then they ended up having people in countries around the world, including China, to monitor things there in case the pandemic broke out there, so they could learn about what was going on firsthand and get the word back to the United States, so we could prepare here. Again, Trump got rid of most of those positions, including the one in China. So I mean, I think that when the history of this is written, Trump's culpability is just going to, it is downright criminal. It is just horrific. I mean, there'll be a lot of terrible things about his legacy, but this, I believe, is by far going to be the worst, at least in terms of body count.
On Trump, but also on Democrats too. I want to talk about this. March 17th, where I am in Florida, we had our primary. That was Illinois, Florida, Arizona, and also Ohio. Ohio Republican Governor Mike DeWine canceled the election, moved it to June. Right response. As a progressive, I give him credit, 100%. Our governor said they voted in the Civil War. We can do it during a pandemic. Ron DeSantis, a Trump guy here in Florida. We also saw a Democrat in Illinois, which Chicago had a 45% increase within the past day or two. He said, we got to vote. And then he endorsed Joe Biden on election day. So these governors, Democrat or Republican, that let people vote when they knew, people from the CDC knew, and Joe Biden in his campaign, not to get political, but Joe Biden in his campaign said, you should go out and vote. Bernie Sanders said, if you want to go and vote, it's up to you. But he didn't put the pressure out to go and vote. For these politicians, isn't that a criminal act to tell people to go out and vote when they can get sick? You have elderly people in the state of Florida, where I am, working the polls, and all across America, majority of these places, there's elderly people working the polls. 2 people in Broward County here, in the biggest county of Florida, where there's a huge epidemic in Broward and Miami-Dade right now. 2 poll workers in Broward County got sick. So, this is a criminal act, I believe, by not just Donald Trump, but all these governors, even the Joe Biden campaign too, for telling people to go out and vote when they know people are going to die because of it, and the death count is already over 2,000 in this country.
Yeah, I was really shocked by that they went ahead with the votes, again, especially in Florida with this large elderly population, but going on with the fact that the beaches remained open for so long, some of them still are, and again, given the huge retirement community, because this really is, anybody can get it, anybody can die, but the percentages of the elderly are truly horrific. We're starting to lose some very special people. The Pulitzer Prize winning playwright Terrence McKenna. We've lost a couple of jazz greats, and I just heard just before he went on that John Prine is in critical condition, may not make it. I mean, he's such a great legacy in his music and everything, and he's this is going to be like the AIDS crisis in the 80s and in the early 90s, when all these people were dying, but it's going to happen a lot quicker, and it is such a this is definitely a scary time, and I really hope that there will be and we shouldn't get political about this right now, but I sure hope that sooner or later there will be a political reckoning for those who are responsible.
Agreed. Let's talk about this. A couple of questions left. The stimulus bill came out. It was passed. From what I hear from a lot of our progressive elected officials, I know they fought hard to keep a lot of the junk out of the bill, but there was still a lot of junk in the bill that, they couldn't get out. A lot of corporate giveaways. It's funny, Stephen, and this is what I want you to talk about, that, the Republicans always call everybody socialist, whether they're a socialist or not. They call Barack Obama a socialist. If you're a Democrat now, you're a socialist. And when they pass bills like this and give corporate giveaways, the Trump tax scam we saw in 2017 pass, it's not socialism, but it's socialism to give everybody health care, Make sure everybody's educated in the country. Make sure we take care of our disabled, people in this country. It's a joke. So, what do you think about that with all this? They talk about socialism, but in the end, really, they love socialism. The rich love the socialism.
Oh yeah, socialism for the rich. It's just been a long time, tradition. But it is particularly ironic looking at the the Republicans that are so willing to give away, $500 billion in these corporate subsidies. I mean, there is supposed to be kind of an oversight board to make sure that it's not a total giveaway. There's some logic to it, but already Trump appears to say, "I'm not going to pay attention to this oversight board," and it appears that he'll be able to pass out things to his buddies as it was. But at least I'm thankful that a lot of these deficit hawks who fought Obama's $800 million dollar subsidies in response to the 2008 crash and recession. That even these Tea Party types have ended up supporting this bill, which again, despite its corporate giveaways, is going to end up being a lifeblood for a lot of people who need it. And I think it is also an indication that I don't think they've had a great change of heart. I think they just realized where the politics is, that this is really something that is hurting everybody, and they can't get away with it. And I think one thing that again, focusing on the 3/4 of this measure that's on the more on the positive side. I mean, it's easy to critique the 25% or not. When we're talking about this amount of money, that's a lot of money going places where it shouldn't. But again, most of the money is going to good places. That I think it shows that in a real emergency, we can come together, and I think it could shift the debate when we're talking about climate change, or we're talking about other needs, that we do have this kind of precedent, and so I think it's important to kind of look in the longer term about what this might mean, and things that seem like radical ideas before, like Medicare for all, like a guaranteed income, things like this. Suddenly they're making sense to a lot of people because people realizing, hey, we need this, so I'm hoping that these kind of crises are on one hand things that those on the right can abuse. We're already seeing, for example, how the Trump administration is saying, oh, the Environmental Protection Agency doesn't have to enforce things now, or we don't have time to do background checks for guns, and governors saying that gun shops are a necessity, but abortions are not, and all these other things. I mean, there are a lot of ways that the right is taking advantage of this, and in some really tragic ways. I think there are also openings for the left to use this crisis to really move things forward and shift the debate, and when we come out of this, use the momentum for making some of the real important changes that are long overdue.
Yeah, let's talk more about the stimulus bill, Stephen. It was good, that they're going to give money to the people, of course, because the people aren't working, they need it, and they deserve it. They're going to put that money back into the economy. My question with the bill was, and this is what, got me a little uptight about the bill. We saw that if you have a child, you get $500 per child. If you're an adult making $70,000, then you get $1,200. And if you're a couple, married couple that's making 100 some odd thousand, you also get the $1,200. My thing is, for people that live in California, where it's extremely expensive to live, and also New York and other big cities where the rent is too damn high to be in plain English, that's nothing for the people like that. That's like not even rent for people like that. Yes, It's something we should be grateful that we're getting money, but it's nothing. That could be like gas money for somebody that lives in California for a couple of weeks. I mean, it's disgraceful.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, realistically, we need like $1,200 a month, at least. And because even with unemployment benefits, and let's take into account that a lot of people are not eligible for unemployment, even though they are being hit really hard, either because they work in the informal in some kind of informal sector, or because they're undocumented, or any number of reasons. And I'm really, really hoping that those of us who are those of us who are salaried, like I say, I'm still working, albeit at home, online teaching and that kind of thing, that those of us who do not need the money will give generously to various nonprofit groups that can pass it on to those who really, really do need it. And because again, this is not nearly enough, and I've been, and as usual, we're seeing how the European countries are way ahead of us in terms of of, um, of a lot more money being made available. Not to mention the fact that they already have the equivalent of Medicare for all, and so people don't have to worry about the medical costs of all this.
Well, Stephen, we hear all this stuff about the Iran sanctions, and we see now in Iran that over 2,000 people, I think it's 2,300 some odd, when I checked this morning, from the coronavirus. The U.S. still has those, crippling sanctions on Iran, and that's, hurting them for getting much needed supplies, cash, and other things, etc. Don't you think the U.S. in this time of need, where we should come together as a world, should say, hey, we may not agree with a lot of things in Iran, but, let's cut some of these sanctions, throw them a bone, try to create peace. This is a time where you could throw bones to other governments and create peace and try to create good graces with their government.
And you're right. I mean it would be a definite time for a new kind of diplomacy that would win us goodwill in a lot of places where there hasn't been a lot of goodwill, but also just on a purely humanitarian level.
Right.
Yes, the Iranian government, like our government, like a number of governments, has screwed up big time in sort of handling this crisis. But the fact is that these sanctions are killing people. While they do not exclude medical equipment or medicines and things like that, they are making it impossible for the a government to get emergency loans, making it impossible for them to actually have the capital to buy the stuff that they need, and to get certain kind of dual use technologies that would be really critically important for fighting this. And so already Trump, I believe, has killed more Iranians than he has Americans because of his response. This is there's really no justification, especially since the sanctions themselves are not justified, because they were supposed to be lifted when Iran signed the nuclear agreement, and they were keeping the nuclear agreement until Trump broke it off and reimposed sanctions. And so again, the sanctions themselves are not justified. It's not just doing a favor by lifting them temporarily. The sanctions should be lifted anyway, because we had no right to reimpose them, given that Iran at the time was under full compliance.
To follow up on the nuclear agreement, I am told that Iran is still, abiding by that agreement, and they're also talking with a lot of European countries that were in the agreement. It wasn't just the U.S. and Iran, like Donald Trump says. This was multiple countries were involved in this agreement.
It was a seven-party agreement. Iran, the United States, Britain, France, Germany, Russia, and China. The United States was the only party that broke it off. But what has happened is that Iran has, since you've reimposed the sanctions, which were the condition for us not reprocessing uranium, et cetera, they have resumed reprocessing uranium, and they have broken some of the limits to some degree. Now, they're still years away from actually getting enough material to make a bomb, but they feel quite understandably that they're no longer obligated to abide by the strictures. Now, I think it's pretty clear that if Biden or some other Democrat gets elected, that they can probably get it so that in return for lifting sanctions, Iran will destroy the additional material they made and go back to those limits. But the fact that I actually talked to about a year ago exactly. Actually, I was in Tehran. I was at the foreign ministry. I spoke for an hour with Foreign Minister Zarif, and he said that he and President Rouhani, who are the leading moderates in the government, were fighting tooth and nail, the hardliners, saying that we have to unilaterally give up all these things that other countries get to do, or it'll destroy billions of dollars worth of equipment, material, and things like that, but at least it'll give an end to the sanctions. And the hardliners are saying, no, you can't trust the United States. Well, if we destroy all this stuff and then they reimpose sanctions anyways, no, we can trust the United States. But guess what? That ended up being wrong. So the hardliners are on the ascendancy. So it's quite possible, even if Biden, whoever does agree to go back to the agreement, the hardliners at this point will say, sorry, you had your chance, too late, and this crisis with Iran will continue.
Thanks so much for your time. I always appreciate you coming on. I always learn a lot from you, and you are an amazing scholar. Thanks so much.
Thanks so much. It was great talking.